A teenage girl was killed in a seaside hotel by a man who, as far as she was concerned, had offered her a job. On January the 31st, 2013, Sasha Marsden turned up to what she believed was her first shift at a guest house in Blackpool. But for 16-year-old Sasha, what should have been the start of her adult life would tragically be the end.
On one of the stab wounds to the back of the head, the knife was bent because he'd hit her that hard and her skull was chipped.
This popular, bright college student was lured to her death in a way that police described as premeditated and calculating. She was tortured, raped, and her body set on fire. And to top it off, her killer, David Minto, pleaded not guilty, putting the family through the absolute hell of going through court.
There's only one word for it really: evil.
The sheer brutality of Minto's attack on this defenceless young woman haunted even hardened police officers.
I remember the superintendent on the case saying in a speech after the case that this was in fact the most harrowing thing of his career and how it had always stayed with them.
In this exclusive half-hour documentary for Shots TV, I will revisit the truly shocking case of Sasha Marsden and meet a family member who is campaigning to keep Minto behind bars. And as her killer serves out a 35-year jail sentence, I ask whether a life should mean life.
When another human pushes a knife into another soul and murders them, bring back death penalty.
Sasha Marsden lived with her parents in Staining, a quiet village near Blackpool. She was studying childcare at Blackpool and Fylde College and was described as popular, bright and fun-loving.
She appeared to be a fun-loving teenager. She had friends, she had a boyfriend, you know, really typical of a 16-year-old wanting to be independent, wanting to sort of find her feet in the world and sort of make her mark. And, you know, she wanted some money and she knew that, you know, getting a job was the way to do it. And, you know, she thought she'd found herself a perfect little sideline that, you know, her family were happy with. It all seemed to be slotted in place for her.
That's when Minto approached Sasha online. He messaged her saying there was a job vacancy at his hotel, a part-time cleaning job that would give her a bit of extra cash. They had some mutual friends, so straight away Sasha probably would have trusted that he was genuine.
So he contacted her on Facebook. They had mutual friends and he'd met Sasha previously. They'd been to Coral Island together with a friend. And he asked if she wanted a job in his hotel. Sasha jumped at the chance. At 16, you know, it's a bit of spending money for her. She, you know, a bit of independence, a first job. So she went, obviously she got dropped off there. She went really happy, buzzing that she'd got a job. The first day everything was fine. It was like an interview the first day, a bit like an induction sort of thing. She came back, he'd paid her £10. She'd only been there maybe an hour or something, so she was really happy with that. And then she went back again on the Thursday. Her dad dropped her off and we never saw her again.
The hotel actually belonged to the mother of Minto's girlfriend. He did work there, but as a barman. But they had absolutely no idea what he was up to. Minto had deliberately invited Sasha for the fake interview and to start her first shift when he knew the hotel would be empty.
He didn't even have the authority to offer her a job. He'd lured her there at a time when he knew his girlfriend wouldn't be at home. And once she arrived at the hotel, he attacked her. Or the evidence suggests instantly. He attacked her from behind with a knife. She had over 100 stab wounds to her head, face and neck. There was 58 just to the back of her head. The wounds that actually killed her was here on her left, like the left artery here. And she bled out. There was no blood left in her body by the time she'd passed away. That was the cause of death.
What she walked into was just hell. She expected to start her job that day, and instead she was attacked almost immediately and her life was over. So just the levels of violence that she suffered was just awful.
David Minto went to great lengths to cover up his crimes. He scrubbed the walls with bleach to clear away the blood. He even claimed Sasha left the hotel alive.
And he wrapped her up in carpet underlay, bedding, whatever he could find in the hotel, put her in a wheelie bin, wheeled her outside into the alleyway, tipped her out into the back alleyway, and set her on fire. And then he tried to dispose of items of her clothes, her shoes, and her jewellery. He tried to flush her jewellery down the toilet. He tried to, he'd thrown her shoes in the bin. He tried to just, dispose of everything, but the police found it all later.
They said that the only way they managed to identify her was via DNA from her toothbrush, because her injury was so severe.
Sasha's parents were worried when their daughter didn't return home, and they went out looking for her. They even called by the hotel and unknowingly came face to face with the killer. But police discovered an overwhelming amount of evidence against Minto, and his lies quickly unravelled.
Officers very quickly found blood spattering on his clothing. I think his behaviour afterwards was very unusual, and obviously because it was so horrific, I think they went the extra mile to make sure they got the right man for this.
A 2-week trial took place at Preston Crown Court. Even hardened court reporters, used to hearing about the very worst crimes, found the details hard to stomach. But for Sasha's family, this trial was traumatic in a way that is impossible to comprehend.
It's not just grief. It's more than grief, because it's trauma. You've just literally sat there and heard how, from my perspective, my little sister, and that was hard enough, how my little sister was literally tortured. She was terrified, was she shouting out for us? Was she shouting out for her mum and dad? Probably, she was screaming for help, undoubtedly. She fought for her life, and she wasn't even 5 foot tall, she was tiny.
The true extent of how much Sasha had suffered was revealed to the family for the first time.
When Sasha died, we were given very, very minimal information about her death, because it was all evidence, and the police have to be careful because that's their case. If they tell the family their whole case, and families are grieving, you can't expect families to keep things quiet like the police keep the things quiet, because you just can't ask a family to do that, they're grieving. And so when you're in court and you're hearing all that evidence, you're finding out that evidence at the same time as everybody else. So you're hearing exactly what happened to Sasha, how much she suffered, what he did to her. You're seeing him when he's standing up there giving evidence, and what he was saying about her, and the descriptions he gave was horrific.
This was the worst case I think I've ever covered. It was so harrowing that we made the decision that we would share the duty of going to court to hear the evidence. So another reporter also went as well, just to give a little bit of relief from it, because, as I say, the detail was so awful, and obviously the jury needs to hear that in its full capacity to be able to make the right decision. And I think to hear that day in and day out, the police advised the family not to go on certain days just because they just would never be able to get that level of detail out of their mind.
At the end of the 2-week trial, David Minto was found guilty of Sasha's murder and sentenced to 35 years in prison. He will be eligible for parole in 2048, but some feel that Minto got off rather lightly considering the depravity of his crimes and his lack of remorse.
I don't think, I think initially I think it felt like justice had been served, that that was the very least he deserved, but it still was only 35 years. Sasha, from what happened to Sasha, she was gone, and nothing was ever going to bring her back, or the opportunities that she would have had back. So I think it was sort of like a bittersweet sort of, yes, the jury got the right decision. Yes, he was sentenced for as long as he could, but the fact that he could at some point be eligible for parole and he could get out, you know, that doesn't sit well.
He didn't just lose his temper by being rejected by Sasha. He showed pure evilness in the attack that he put on her, and he was so much bigger than her. You know, she was tiny, and the ferocity of it and the brutality of it. Like one of the stab wounds to the back of the head, the knife was bent because he'd hit her that hard, and her skull was chipped because he'd gone at her that hard. But then not only that, you know, she's lying there, she's bled out, she's got no blood left in her body, so you can only imagine how much blood is there. He then takes her body and rapes her. Sorry, but how do you come back from that?
It's fair to say that Sasha's family were severely traumatised by the awful things they saw and heard during the 2-week trial.
It's broken the family because there's a person missing.
And in her sister Katie's words, they had no fight left in them to appeal the 35-year sentence, even though they did feel it was too lenient.
David Minto's probably going to get out one day, and any vulnerable female will not be safe when he does get out.
I mean, of all the cases I've ever sat through, this is the one where I thought if somebody was going to get a whole life term and never get out, this was it.
My sister was murdered, and I'm a big sister and I didn't save her. But now I've failed my mum as well because I promised my mum.
Jane Marsden died fighting to keep her daughter's killer behind bars. Her aim was to change a law that currently says a grieving family only has 28 days to appeal a lenient sentence. The family's petition managed to get 14,894 signatures, but sadly this was a long way from the 100,000 needed to get Sasha's law debated in Parliament. Jane passed away early in 2024, thinking that the man who tortured her daughter to death in a most brutal and calculating way may someday be free and could kill again. Now, Sasha's sister, bereaved Katie Brett, carries on that campaign.
Every day she'd wake up and the first thing she'd check is the petition, and even if there was one signature, you know, every time, you know, one signature, oh, we've got another signature, she knew exactly how many signatures we had. And with the first petition, and it was going up in the thousands and it was going up really quickly, and I wish I'd have got her reaction. You know, every time it hit another 1,000, she was punching the air, yes, 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 like it meant so much to her. And I just wish I'd got that reaction, because if people could see how much it meant to her, then, you know, perhaps, you know, they might have, like, you know, seen it from a mum's perspective.
Katie did in fact contact the Ministry of Justice in 2023, and she got a response which confirmed that they have no plans to remove the 28-day limit. I'm going to read out an excerpt from the letter dated August the 16th. It reads, "The government recognises that it's important that victims, prosecuting authorities and members of the public are aware of the unduly lenient sentence scheme ahead of sentencing hearings, where the time limit ordinarily begins." It goes on to say that since 2019, the Crown Prosecution Service has provided information about the scheme in letters to bereaved families that are sent out after conviction. But Katie, along with other campaigners, says this does not take into account the stress and trauma that families feel during the grieving process.
I mean, how can a family who've lost a child in this case, but, you know, a close loved one, be able to process all the horrible things that have happened to them, you know, their final moments through the court case, then have the peace of mind to be able to think, that's not right. I need to fight this, or I need to question this, or fight for a longer sentence within 4 weeks. I just don't think that is possible. I think, you know, the family, you know, are suffering deep trauma. You know, they need to be given more time. You know, and that should, you know, maybe up to a year. I mean, even a year doesn't seem long enough. You know, if you're living with that trauma. I mean, her family will live with that their whole lives. But definitely a longer term is definitely needed, to give families a voice, to give that, you know, the victim a voice.
And then for the next 28 days, you're not thinking, oh, well, I want to go and do that again. Because that's what it means. If you appeal that sentence, you know, you have to pick apart all that evidence. You have to pick apart the whole thing. You have to look at what the judges said. You've got to relive it all. The sentencing guidelines do state, you know, certain sentences for certain offences and certain aggravating and mitigating factors. And the judge stated, you know, all the aggravating factors of this case and what he did to Sasha. And it was the sexually motivated murder of a child. There was sadistic, you know, it was a sexual motive. There was sadistic behaviours there. The prolonged suffering that Sasha had, the attempts to, you know, destroy her body, the fact that he raped her, you know, while she was dead or dying, proves that it was, you know, how could it have not been sexual? And it was premeditated. With this, it was all proven. There was no doubt at all. So it does meet the criteria for a whole life order. And the judge even says in his sentencing remarks, there is no mitigation. So if there's no mitigation, then there's no reason why he shouldn't have got that whole life order. The CPS put the case forward, and it still wasn't referred, but there's no justification as to why it wasn't referred. They've said, oh, the Attorney General's office have said this case was referred to us back in 2013 by the CPS. So the CPS must have known that this was an unduly lenient sentence, but then you're relying on the Attorney General's office to do the right thing, and they're saying, well, we didn't refer it, but we can't tell you why we didn't refer it because we don't have a record. And even in court, he was still lying, and he was trying to say that it was somebody else. It must have been a mystery assailant that came in. He was trying to say that he found Sasha's dead body at the bottom of the stairs, and because he doesn't like blood, he put her in the bath to wash her and then put her outside, and that he didn't set fire to her. It's literally laughable. If it wasn't real, and it wasn't, you know, a real 16-year-old girl that they were talking about, it's actually laughable that that was his defence. And then because he was allowed to appeal his sentence, we weren't, but he was, and his defence for appealing the sentence was, I didn't plan to murder her, I only planned to rape her.
As it stands, Minto is eligible for parole in 2048. He will be 57 years old. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that he will automatically get out, but those who are campaigning argue that this cold, calculated killer is likely to offend again if he is granted parole.
The thought of him getting out and hurting somebody else, that, you know, Sasha, nobody wanted Sasha to die. You know, Sasha's death can never be justified, it can never be explained. I'll never be okay with what happened to Sasha, but her death means that somebody, you know, everybody else is safe from David Minto. He can't hurt anybody else while he's in jail. You know, children and young girls are all safe because he's in jail, but if he gets out, Sasha's died for nothing, because people will not be safe.
Every single rule that's put in place, from MOT in your car, insuring your car, tax, when you go on planes, all the health and safety, going through everything we do in life, pedestrian crossings, is to do what? Stop people from getting injured and getting killed. So if that's the number one priority of any parliament, protecting our way of life, protecting people, why is it when another human pushes a knife into another soul and murders them, that it potentially could be out of prison in 20 years when they've took someone's life?
I mean, of all the cases I've ever sat through, this is the one where I thought if somebody was going to get a whole life term and never get out, this was it. And the fact that he showed no remorse, despite being, you know, shown evidence that proved categorically it was him. You know, to not only attack her and sexually abuse her, then to wrap her up in carpet and dump her in an alleyway like she was a piece of rubbish and set her on fire to try and hide what happened. you know, to answer the door when her parents came knocking looking for her, to front it out when the police arrived without a care in the world, just seems so callous, so inhumane, that maybe he, you know, could he ever be rehabilitated? You know, is a question that, you know, needs asking, I suppose.
I am very strong on this. If you murder someone or stab someone, whether you like this opinion or not, because unless you've watched someone bleed out or lost a loved one and that person's still breathing, I truly believe bring back death penalty.
Sasha's death has saved people. That's what, you know, that's how we all felt as a family. Yeah, Sasha died, but, you know, she lost her life, and as a result of that, he's locked up in prison. He can't hurt anybody else. So, you know, it's just right, isn't it? Like, why should he get out when he's done that, and be allowed to just kill somebody else? Any murdered child's parent, and they would not wish it on anybody else. But if he does get out, then, you know, he will. I will bet my own life on it. He will attack somebody else again.
Sasha's murder truly was horrific. It was every parent's worst nightmare. Add to that, it destroyed the reputation of the hotel where Minto killed Sasha, bearing in mind that he was only employed there as a barman and that the owners could never have imagined what he was capable of doing.
You know, there are other people like him out there, and there's just not enough deterrent. You know, they do what they do and they essentially get away with it, don't they? They might lose a few years in jail, but they get to live their life, and the real victim has lost their life and they can never come back.
At the end of the day, we're not talking about someone fighting and accidentally killing someone. That's totally different. We're not talking about someone accidentally running someone over. But when you actually take a soul from the planet, soul for a soul.
Because she should be here. It's not like she was ill or you know, there's a reason why she left. She was taken because of somebody that's evil. David Minto's probably going to get out one day, and any vulnerable female will not be safe when he does get out.
Katie says she will fight for every person who has been stolen from this world, and that she's doing this to help the other families of murder victims who are experiencing the same grief.
You don't need to ask me what my mum wanted, because as any mum, they will know what they would want if it was their daughter that it happened to. My sister was murdered and I'm a big sister and I didn't save her, but now I've failed my mum as well because I promised my mum.
And are you going to keep on fighting for those signatures?
Yeah, till I'm dead.
Thank you.